Hey friends, this is Pop Culture Makes Me Jealous, where we analyze pop culture through the lens of race or gender, and sometimes both. I'm your host, Julia Washington, and on today's show, Ivana Robinson is back, and we're talking about the Cheetah Girls. Cheetah Girls 2, to be exact. Welcome back to the show, Ivana. I'm so happy you're here. For those of you who have been around a while or are new, Ivana was here in season 4, and we talked about Whitley Gilbert, and now she's here to talk about Cheetah Girls 2.
Woohoo!
Which is,
can't wait.
I know, it's so exciting. And then, but like when you were like, we have to do Cheetah Girls 2, and I thought at first I was like, I'm gonna make this girl explain why 2 and not 1. But we'll get into that in a moment, because we're going to do a quick summary for everyone. And if you've been here a minute, again, you know the drill. We pull this shit from Google because that's what everyone relies on for their information. So what is Google telling us? Google tells us a teenage vocal group whose members are also best friends continue their crusade to become a top pop group. One member decides to enter the group in a Barcelona music festival, and the girls are thrilled. It's Viva España as they set off on the adventure of a lifetime. So that's Google.
I think this is pretty accurate.
Yeah, I agree. This film stars Raven Simone. It was released in 2006. The first Cheetah Girls movie was the biggest Disney Channel movie to hit until High School Musical showed up, which I love. And I kind of hate that High School Musical knocked him out of the way. It was directed by the legendary Kenny Ortega. And the first scene is full of just high octane energy. I actually was a little surprised that I did find reviews, because I wasn't sure, because it's the early 2000s and it's Disney Channel. So you just don't really know. And the New York Times actually gave us a review. So writer Virginia Hefferman had this to say. In the first Cheetah Girls, which was the Disney Channel's biggest original movie before High School Musical, the 4 considered themselves divas in training. Now they're international superstars in training, complete with handsome, soulful Spanish groupies and a home turf rival, Marisol, who is played by the rising Mexican pop star Belinda Peregrine, I think is how you pronounce that. Various jokes and plot points turn on the learning and bungling of Spanish and English. It's clever to set the real world American imperative, how to accommodate the Spanish language in Spain itself. A gentle intelligence informs this and other themes of the Cheetah Girls too, end quote. Okay. So first I need you to tell me, why Cheetah Girls 2?
I mean, the easy answer is it's just better. It's more fun than the first one. I think for me personally, it has to do with the setting of them being in Spain, being in Barcelona. I have loved Barcelona since middle school. And so having this movie and their friendship set there and all of that really, I think, just spoke to, teenage Ivana at that time. I think it is the storyline that is relatable, but also they're not physically in like their high school or whatever, like most of us are not getting to go on summertime trips with our best friends in high school to Spain for, our dream thing. So I think it's sort of a good mix of like relatable, but also that sort of dream idyllic situation.
Totally. And I love how female focused this one is. Like, and I didn't watch the first one as a refresher, because I mean, why? But I love how this one's very much like the friendships are so important, and then like the men are secondary. So like, yeah, sure, we've got these like cute boys who are like, hey, look at these cute girls, and then the girls are like, hey, look at these cute boys. But at the end but through the whole film, the friendship is what matters, and that's like the whole through line, right? Like they're growing, they're changing. What does that mean for their friendship? And they handle it in a way that's like low stakes drama, which I really, really love.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, during the, I guess, sort of like climax part of it, there is a moment where Raven's character says, like, my friendship, is more important than the group or whatever. And I feel like that's very mature for, being a teen girl and having these dreams and just big feelings all
Yeah.
around. And so I felt like that was just a really mature conclusion to come to and a choice for her to make in that moment.
Totally. Look at Disney teaching us how to be grown ass adults. I mean, they weren't always, right?
No. No, they were not. And that's probably why Cheetah Girls, like as a franchise, I think really spoke to people, spoke to teen girls. It's the friendship element, but also it's the racial diversity piece. I think even the diversity in sort of the girls' different background stories. I think having different family structures, and even though that's not necessarily a large part of it, I think even just mentioning that, speaking to that. And I know Cheetah Girls is a book series, and I never read the book, so I don't know how much of that fully translated over, but I think it says something for Disney to have included that, because I assume it came from the books.
When I was doing research for this episode, it populated as having been an adaptation. And the woman who wrote the books is from New York. Queens? Is she from Queens? I don't recall. But not having read the books either, it sounds like she's pretty pleased with the way that they turned this into a film. And that says a lot. Well, it said a lot in 2006. Nowadays, I think authors are just excited to make a lot of money off of like a big celebrity taking their book and turning it into a movie, regardless of how it turns out.
Yeah. I feel like that must have had, one, to keep, because I think, well, at least some of the racial components and like that being a part of the story, and, that New York melting pot situation, I'm assuming had a lot to do with her writing this story.
The author is Deborah Gregory, and she's from Brooklyn. I was wrong. Okay. I misspoke. She's from Brooklyn. She went to the Fashion Institute of Technology, which I love that for her. She has a BS in cultural studies. Love that for her. But she was interviewed for a book called Black, White, Other Biracial Americans Talk About Race and Identity. So that really is a huge part of her life, apparently. It looks like that's okay. Well, then I love that, Disney. Good job. Way to keep it true to the author's vision. Like, good job. Because I think it is kind of important. I think a lot of times too, like when we think of like, so you're in Mexico, right? And I'm in California, which used to be Mexico. They like to forget. And I think sometimes too, it's really easy to forget that like Latino is like the all-encompassing word. Not that Spanish people qualify as Latinos. They're not. But in terms of like the diaspora in North America, it's really, I think it's really easy to get locked into a specific type of Latino storyline or a specific type of Black storyline. And I think Cheetah Girls does a really good job at being like, here's some, here's a little different and not a little different. What's the word I'm looking for? Here's some diversity that doesn't feel forced because we're, coming from New York. Because sometimes stuff that's based in California, you're just like, are you guys just realize we're a huge state, y'all? Like Northern California and Southern California are very different. Like it's not the same. Anyway, that's not the point.
Not the same. Very large state. But I think not even just them being in New York, but the fact that they're set in a performing arts high school, because that is probably one of the only places where at this particular age that these four girls would come into contact with each other, because outside of singing, they are different socioeconomic statuses. They are, I think coming from different parts of the city, have other interests, right, that they kind of focus on outside of that. And so without that piece of it, bringing them together, they wouldn't be, together. Because I know we love to talk about like Friends and how like it's in New York and why is there no diversity? And it's like, yeah, but also those particular white people were definitely just hanging out with each other in very
Yeah,
specific settings.
absolutely.
So I
Were you
don't know that it's
that far off? I know. Were you the one I was having that conversation with? Was that you and me? Where I was
no.
like, yeah, because it's, I think like you, it's like, you guys, why is anyone shocked that they're like, why are we shocked that it's all white? They're never gonna, like, look at how homophobic they are. They're never going outside of their bubble.
No.
Not once. Like the closest they get to diversity is like Monica working at an Italian restaurant. Which even then, some Italians.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Yes.
I was rewatching Julia Fox on Z-Way, and they were like basically talking about how Italians are like the black people of white people. And I was like, why did they cancel Z-Way?
Probably because she said that.
Anyway, it was interesting. But you're right, them being at a performing arts school. And I think that's a thing too that doesn't really exist in like the part of California that I am in. I know like Southern California has performing arts schools, but it's not really something that exists outside of a city that doesn't have a large entertainment factor to it either.
Mm-hmm. I think that definitely sets something different.
Entertainment Weekly threw their hat in the mix of reviews and had this to say, quote, "Yes, it's a bit ridiculous watching four calculatedly multiracial girls lip sync to peppy songs about changing the world, but even in a saccharine version of girl power, or to quote the Cheetahs, growl power, is better than other tween bait options like MTV's The Hills that teach girls to put their boyfriends first. The Cheetahs at least have a message, and messages are always easier to swallow when accompanied by a well choreographed dance number," end quote. So I actually really loved this comparison because the Cheetah Girls in the Hills, Laguna Beach, all that stuff, that's all the same time frame. That's all the same period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love that that Entertainment Weekly, who's kind of a big one in the, hey, this is what you should watch industry, is like acknowledging like the Cheetah Girls are empowering. You can call it campy, you can call it cheesy, you can call it whatever you want. But the bottom line is this is probably better than watching The Hills, which full of reality show drama that even though it was a female-led show, it still centered around their boyfriends. Like, even though Lauren was the narrator and like you followed the girls in their day-to-day, they still centered all the men they encountered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was where all of the fighting and the issues and the, really still centered. And, Lauren being the girl who didn't go to Paris for her boyfriend. And
yeah.
I had never thought about that comparison as someone who very much was a Hills girl, Cheetah Girls, like into all of it. But I never thought to think about like them in this dichotomy.
Mm-hmm. So my question to you, how do you think this show, or excuse me, how do you think this film impacted how you view female relationships?
For me, I have been obsessed with friendship since always. So that's probably a portion of why I love the Cheetah Girls, is because anything that is like female friendship focused, I'm about it. I also think because it's genuine friendship, like it's friendship I can relate to, in that they genuinely care about each other. It's not a proximity friendship.
Yeah. I love that because, when you have a proximity friendship, it's not always healthy, but it's convenient.
Exactly.
You don't always see that either, right? Like, and going back to the Hills comparison, which I rewatch every summer. Why? I don't know. These girls are all still friends because of proximity, right? Like Lauren's friends with
Mhm.
Whitney because they work in the closet together, and Heidi sees Lauren more often because they live together. And then once, Spencer becomes a problem and she moves out, they don't see each other as much. So there's no like true depth to or connection to their relationship. It's all based on proximity. Whereas with the Cheetah Girls, they're like, I don't want to say, I hate the phrase ride or die. Like that's, I think, something that I can't take anymore. There's a lot of things I can't take anymore, if I'm gonna be honest. But they all do actively like care for each other and respect each other. And like, you do get the sense that even if they didn't go to this performing arts, like once this performing arts school is done, they're going to continue being friends.
Mhm. Yeah, because I think to that point, right? It's New York. They don't necessarily live by each other,
Right.
or convenient, right? They just need to figure out a way to get to the school. So the idea that they're also hanging out outside of that
Mm-hmm.
means that like they're making it a priority. Also in the way that they do, fight or argue with each other, like there are lots of disagreements, but when one of them is in need, okay, let us put that to the side. Let us come together. Let us, because they do have a bigger goal in mind,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of being this huge, pop group. I think it's a little like group projecty and like how much someone is really committed to the dream. Like it sounds good and
Yeah.
it's fun, but like we're also people at different stages and working through that as you're also, working through puberty and all of that.
Could you imagine? Oh my gosh, that kind of pressure. And it's kind of like a parallel for them too, because look at how huge Raven has become as a star. I mean, she was always a big star. She like was thrust into the limelight at, I don't know, was she 2 or 3 when she showed up on the Cosby Show? Maybe 4.
Yeah,
But the point is the
very
same. She's a
young.
little girl and she's been in this spotlight her entire life, and then, becomes a Disney darling. So the parallels there too for the actors of like the pressure of becoming pop stars and then still also maintaining like some version of normalcy. I can't even imagine. Like I struggled through adolescence without added pressures.
Yeah, it's really hard. I don't know what my neighbors are doing, but anyway, I think about that because you have Raven who was a star and is extremely talented. Two of the other members are 3LW members who is an R&B group, which I think is an interesting transition because
Mhm.
they were out there as this music group
Right.
as sort of older, quote unquote, right? Like Raven was very much came up in that sort of Disney
Mm-hmm.
vein of things. Um, Whereas Adrienne and Kiley were out here doing a totally different thing. So I think it's interesting for Disney to bring them in and kind of regress their image almost. Um, but I think what helps is like, yes, okay, it's Disney, it's singing, it's whatever, but also like they are all have proven their talent in general, right? It's not like
Yeah.
they needed Disney to be this thing,
Right.
which I think sets them apart from other Disney franchises a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good point. Disney's an interesting one though too, because I was watching a TikTok because that's how I take in my entertainment anymore. I forget, was it, maybe it's the girl, it can't be the girl from Victorious. Because that's Nickelodeon. One of these like early 2000s childhood stars has a podcast vidcast now, and she had the sidekick from That So Raven on. It's, we're going on almost
I know
20
what you're
years
talking
ago.
about.
Have you
I
seen
know
that
what you're
clip?
talking about. I've seen the clip. It's Christy Carlson Romano,
Thank
who played
you.
Ren on Even Stevens, and she was interviewing Annalise Vanderpool, who played Chelsea in That's So Raven.
Even Stevens, that's it. Because you know what? I'm gonna be honest with you. They all these little brown hair girls that were during Nickelodeon, Disney primetime era of the mid 2000s, they all look the same to me.
Yes.
Sorry. Or I'm not sorry. I don't know.
You're not wrong.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so for people listening, the clip is essentially, tell me her name again, because we're going on almost 20 years ago from when all this shit happened.
So the host is Christy Carlson Romano. I guess the guest is Annalise Vanderpool.
Thank you. So the guest, Annalise Vanderpool, is basically telling the host, That's So Raven wasn't originally That's So Raven. It was originally centered around a white girl. And then it turns out that Raven's clearly funnier and better at this. And so but there was concern about whether or not a Black girl could pull the lead of a show. And anyone who's watched That's So Raven, like when I saw that clip, I was like, how could you ever doubt Raven Simone if you've seen that story? She's so good. She's such a talented force. And when she showed up on Blackish as Dre's sister, it's like, thank you, Jesus, because like she's got such talent. And whether or not she wanted to be in the industry, I don't know. I hope she writes a memoir one day because I'd love to know the inner workings of her life. But she's just so brilliant. And she's got all these great little bits about her and her acting and the way that she does perform. So to hear that story, and then the initial, for me, my reaction was, of course, Disney doesn't want to center a Black story. Of course not. But I also kind of appreciate that they were like, well, it's very clear that Raven's better than everybody, so she should probably be the lead, rather than doubling down and being like, we're going to stick to our guns. So like, good job, Disney. You did one thing right.
Yeah. Yeah. Because can you imagine if she just continued to be relegated to the sidekick?
And they would, I mean, and her career would have probably been so different. And who knows how that would have impacted her emotionally? Because how hard is it when you know that you're the more talented one, but not being given the chance? Like, it doesn't matter that you're both in the same room and you're still not being given the chance. So I hate that kind of thought process existed in that era and still kind of exists today, because Black Panther went through a similar hurdle. But they had, the people that were involved had the wherewithal to say, you know what, we can do better, because that's funny. Raven's clearly talented. The most talented one in the room.
She's such a great comedic actress, like with the use of her voice and her body, and
all the things. And then, like I said, when she showed up on Blackish, I was like, this makes perfect sense. I cannot imagine any other actress who could play Dre's sister. And I think she had already come out at that point. So I really loved that they wrote that as part of the script for her, because then she's getting to actually and truly play a character that represents, that's a part of the LGBTQ community, as she is. And it just, I don't know, just like, girl, write a book. We need to know. I need to know everything. It's okay if you want to admit,
got a lot to spill.
I know. It's like, it's okay if you want to admit the Cosby years until he's dead. I get it. But like, we need everything. You've been in this business a long time.
Yeah. Like there just couldn't be another Galleria. Like you need the energy, you need the talent, you just.
And there's also like a warmth about her too. Like, even though she can be very strong and comedic, her comedic work is really, like, she's just gifted that way. There's something that is about her that is very warm. And I don't know if this is because I've been watching her since we were children, or if it's just naturally true, but like, there's something about her that just makes me feel like I could just watch her perform all the time. Like, she's just so, she's in my mind, this just makes sense for her because she's so naturally a star. Like, like, she's just star power all the way.
Yeah, it comes off as very effortless.
Yes, that's the word. Thank you. She's very effortless. And I assume she's delightful. I'm just making up all kinds of shit now because really, I just love Raven Simone so much.
Yeah, I think no matter sort of like your age, like you have a certain nostalgia for her work.
Because even as a little kid on the Cosby Show, she was just so freaking good and just had this natural like ease on stage. And it's so impressive when kids can be like that. And then conversely, you hear all these horror stories about stage parents, and I actually don't know that much about her family and her background when it comes to like how her parents were, but it just, you wouldn't know she didn't love it if she'd never loved it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. The internet has a lot to say, because the internet has a lot to say. And there is talk on the internet that Cheetah Girls 2 is better than Cheetah Girls 1, which is literally why you were like, Julia, we are going to talk about Cheetah Girls 2 because it is better. And you said you could totally talk the whole franchise, but really it's all about Cheetah Girls 2. That's literally what you told me.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I know we've talked a lot about it already, but now I need you to stand on your soapbox and tell us exactly why Cheetah Girls 2 is the best. The best one.
Yeah. The best one. One, it includes Raven, because the third one did not.
The third one did not. I didn't see the third one because by 2000, so this one came out in 2006. So my son was still like a toddler. So by like 2000, like 8-ish, I was like, we were like moving in different, like, and I no longer had control over the remote control.
Yeah, I definitely didn't watch it when it came out, but I remember being like, well, maybe let me check out some clips of this. No. Okay. It's a foursome, 4-part harmony. You need Raven, or it does not all come together in the same way. It's set in Barcelona, which is one of my favorite cities, but I think at this particular time just has a very wonderful air about it. And, you know, they get to do their little dance numbers, different, you know, like landmarks and special places. They get to, you know, pretend they speak Spanish, which obviously Adrienne Bailon does. But that was a whole plot line of the other girl who's taken Spanish, but like isn't all the way there, right?
Yeah.
So there's that. It's also a fun storyline with like their moms, and like Lynn Whitfield plays Raven Simone's character's mother. So it's like you get some intergenerational relationships happening, and you know she gets to reconnect with her dreams and all of that, which I love. And the music is better. Like the songs are catchier. They hit better. Like I think they kind of found their rhythm together.
Yeah.
In the second movie.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I feel like, and then I feel like adding that sort of plot point of having the girl from Barcelona being sort of like not the rival, but like the potential Marisol, the character, the potential of her coming in and replacing somebody, right? I think it was going to be Raven's character, right? Like, because Raven was going to leave. I think that also adds to it too, because then it doesn't just challenge the group, it also challenges the friendship in a way. And then the fact that they can like overcome that in such a healthy way. Like it's, you know, it's not laden with all this unnecessary drama. It's like, it feels like teenage girl. I don't want to say typical teenage girl, because that's not a fair statement, because everyone's teen years are different. But if someone grows up in sort of a non-chaotic environment, this feels very true to the type of teenage girl friendship one would have.
Yeah, the storyline, like, okay, like there are parts of it, obviously, like we weren't going to Spain, we're not joining big musical competitions, but like in terms of the friendship part of it, it is very relatable in how they relate to each other, in what happens when there is someone who connects with your best friend in a way that you can't.
Yeah.
Right. And how that kind of shifts things.
Because it can feel really scary for when you see somebody bonding with your best friend, because it's like, well, what are they giving you that I can't provide? Like that's I'm nervous and I'm insecure now.
And I think as they're also getting older, you know, talking about going to college and things like that, like you are also inadvertently having conversations about going off and doing different things, right? And so where does this friendship fit into all of that? And I think those are, you know, regardless of sort of the childhood, right, or the adolescence you may have had, to me, I think that feels very relatable to a wide variety.
Yeah. And I appreciate that they don't force anything either. Like, it's like just a natural progression. I don't know. I keep saying it over and over and over again. How many times could I say this? I just really appreciate, and wholesome's the wrong word, you know, but it feels like there's an element of wholesomeness to it. Like, yeah, it's just, and I agree with you. I love seeing the moms in this one too. I think, because I don't remember if they were in the first. Again, I didn't rewatch the first one. It's probably been 20 years since I've seen the first one.
Yeah, they're in the first one, but I wouldn't say that they have their own storylines. Whereas in, beyond being the mothers. Whereas in this one, Galleria's mom gets to reconnect with her love of fashion and was like apparently a designer before she became a mom, and kind of realizing what she has put on hold for all of those years and refinding her love for it. And then, what's her name? Chanel, Adrienne's character, her mom has been in this relationship that I think was a plot point in the first movie, or at least mentioned.
Okay.
But they've been together for a while now, and like he brought them to Spain. And so she's like, why has this man not proposed to me? If like he's clearly trying to put me as part of the life, and dealing with having a child who is maybe not completely on board. With that relationship.
I actually really loved how they handled that, especially when it all came together, when she walks into the room and she's like, hey, like, I know that you love my mom and that you are looking at becoming my stepdad. And just the way they had that conversation just felt really, she's coming from a place of sincerity. She's coming from a place of fear. And then he receives all of it instead of like doing some toxic, trashy dude shit. He basically reaffirms her and is like, I hear you. I get it. I understand. And then says some really comforting shit. And you're just like, this is how it's supposed to be done, guys. Like, can we have more of this? Like, and normally we're a spoil-filled show, but it's been over a week since I watched the movie. So I'm a little fuzzy on the finer details, but watching that scene, especially being a single parent who attempted dating, like just watching this guy be like, hey, I love your mom. I love you. Your fears are valid. This is going to be okay. What can we do? And it just felt like a really great way to model how to become a bonus parent.
Yeah, because I mean, throughout it, that's kind of part of it, right? Is that Chanel's not very nice to this man.
Yeah.
Like he says the most innocuous thing, like, oh, enjoy Barcelona, you got your Metro passes, whatever. And she's like, ugh, look at him telling us what to do. Which, former teenage girl, also have a single mother as a parent, I very much get, that vibe.
Yeah.
But to also have someone who, like, to your point, he got it. He also did not, take it personally, right? He still continued to love on her through all of her sort of, brattiness, right? Through the wall.
And we don't see that a lot in pop culture. We don't see that a lot in television and film, where the guy's like, I get it. You are a teenage girl. I'm not going to make you feel bad about shit. I'm just going to provide love and comfort and support. And I'm here when you need me. And it's very rare that we see men be in that form, which is so upsetting because I don't think it's that hard.
It's not, but I think another thing as you're talking about it that comes light is he's also not a parent. I feel like in shows when you do see that, it is someone who has like had a marriage, has had children, and so is trying to like bridge the gap of these two families. Yeah. Whereas this person, like based on it, he's been single this whole time. He's this, rich, wealthy businessman who travels a lot. And so I think it also kind of fights what we would consider to be the archetype of a character like him, to be so open to being a parent, and to actually be fairly good at it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you for that. Sometimes Disney gets it right, damn it. Which is great.
And I think is that also a sign of like when you include different voices in the room, right? When you get people coming from different perspectives to create the story.
Yeah, I agree because it doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel like the kind of camp that exists in Cheetah Girls isn't the kind of camp that like reinforces weird stereotypes, right? Like it's very much talking to that tween generation, and then teenagers can enjoy it too. And it does it in a way that doesn't make you feel like watching it again in 2023. It was, I actually think I want to invite my niece over and watch this film with me moment, rather than like some of the older Disney films where you're just like, well, this is a movie we're going to have to wait until you're old enough to have this conversation.
Yeah, or like we have to watch it with these caveats, right?
Yeah.
Of certain things. Yeah. And I wonder, I was just thinking, like, being, I consider myself a member of the Spice Girls generation.
Yes.
This is just after the Spice Girls, right? And so I wonder, like, even how much of that kind of helped shape, just from an adolescent perspective, how we view the Cheetah Girls and this friendship and girl power.
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't that an interesting thought? The Spice Girls there was so much misunderstanding in the household I grew up in about the Spice Girls. And then when I did exploration on my own, it was like, oh no, this is actually like, these are women I should potentially look up to. Like, they don't put up, like, they're doing some good shit. And then this podcast I listened to did a deep dive on all their memoirs. And then you're listening to them and you're just like, they held their own. Like, good for you. And that got overlooked in the 90s and 2000s in a lot of ways, which happened to women in the 90s and 2000s. Like, that was just the theme, where it was like, we're painting you as this like, I mean, we all lived through it. I don't need to recap it. We're seeing a reckoning happening now, which I really do appreciate, because we've created a space now where women can come forward and be like, you were trash to me because here's what I was going through, and thanks.
Yeah, like having social media, having, at least for some people, just a better like feminist theory, like view.
Yeah.
Because I do think there, from a media standpoint, right, there are a lot of women who were not treated very well. Most women were not treated very well and kind of got the short end of the stick.
Yeah.
And so now to be able to hear from them, they get to tell their own stories and like the real perspective of things that were going on, also having a more mature understanding of the world that we live in and the systems and the oppressive structures that kind of
and in all of the research I did for this episode, there wasn't really anything about Cheetah Girls where people were painting them in that light. So they're kind of the exception to that early 2000s teenaged girls and young women, or manipulative demons, watch out. Like, they don't really have that looming over them the way that some of the other female legends of the time do. And that's also kind of interesting to me too. And I wonder if it's because Disney is so particular, and I think they are still particular, but they were more particular back then about their image and the people affiliated with them and their image.
Yeah, I would be interested to kind of, I guess, dive into that more and just see how that has kind of shifted things.
Which is why Raven needs to write a book.
She does. I would read it. I love a memoir. All right, give me the dirt. All right, I want to know.
Yeah.
Just thinking about, I guess, my whole like Disney evolution and thinking about how old these young women were, and the idea that they did have an image before Disney, right? Which is just uncommon, I think, for that particular time period. And to your point, how Disney wants to mold people, particularly when they're in the movie franchise situation.
Yeah. I mean, look at Zac Efron. I mean, his full circle sort of, you can see, I mean, we're not here to talk about men, but he's the one that is kind of the most obvious to me, because I did watch a lot. I did watch his we all watched his transition, the High School Musical, Troy. And then, the first movie sort of a sidestep from Disney. He's still a basketball player. And then he slowly moved further and further away from that. And now he's, the guy, well, no, wasn't his show on Disney, or was it Netflix? It doesn't
Which goes on
matter.
Netflix.
Netflix, thank you. But the point is like he did a slow walking away from Disney and managed to have some sort of successful something or other. You know, Raven, she's still, I mean, like I said, she's on Blackish, which is which is done on ABC, which is owned by Disney. So she still has like a toe in the water, but it is kind of,
well,
but then when
and Raven's Home.
Yeah.
That's still on, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Right. But then also when I think of some of the other stars from that era, I'm like, okay, so Vanessa Hudgens is kind of moved more into like a hosting situation. Because that's what I really put her in now, because she's always doing the red carpets. So that's how I see her now. You know, I don't see her.
I didn't even know that.
Else.
I was thinking of she's got those the Christmas movies on Netflix.
Right, she does have the princess, the night prince, something about the princess,
like the switch up or something.
The princess switch. People are at home are like yelling the name of the show at us, but yeah, there's like 3 of them, I think. Yeah, the princess switch, right? Like the princess is switched again or something like that. I couldn't even tell you what Sharpay is doing or any of the other like I see. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting how Disney kind of is like, here's your ecosystem that will cultivate you in, and then who actually gets out of it.
Well, and I think that's probably a very not specific, but calculated move, right? And how to do that. Because yeah, you think about a Raven who like, she had, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Like filmography. I don't know, but she had, you know, IMDb credits.
Yeah, she had film credits
before Disney.
Yeah,
right. I think there's that aspect of like having already sort of proven her talent to a certain extent, right? And then sort of breaking out of that, or how you choose to kind of work through that. You have like a Zendaya.
Yeah.
Right. Like she is technically a Disney girl.
She is a Disney darling. We watch Shake It Up all the time. I freaking loved that show. Couldn't tell you what Bella Thorne's doing. Sorry, Bella.
But yeah, like, so I think there is, and there can be a way, but it's also like, who's behind you? Like, and I guess this is maybe where I feel like Raven probably does have a supportive, you know, family unit, because to make that transition, and as far as I know, like, did not have any sort of huge, you know, like teenage breakdown, like a Lindsay Lohan situation to kind of break out of that Disney thing, right? It all seems fairly natural.
Yeah.
Everyone should go watch it. It's on Disney Plus. It's just a good time.
It is a good time. It's just fun. Like I had it on in the background, and it was just like a nice casual viewing kind of situation, which I really appreciate, because I feel like there's so much stuff nowadays where you just you have to pay attention or you're going to miss something. And while I appreciate y'all wanting us to be smarter, at the same time, I'm putting together a puzzle. I need something just talking at me. And this was an enjoyable, like, I still understood what was going on. I didn't miss anything. I walked away feeling good and liking the film.
Yeah. And I think it's one of those things where, like, yes, it's Disney, so there is a lesson involved in it, but like, it's also not the point.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Ivana, I'm so glad you came back. I know you never know, right? You send out the things to people and you're like, who's willing to come back? This is how you know they had a good time, is they're willing to come back.
No, thank you for inviting me. You know, I love pop culture, so I love listening to your other conversations.
Oh, thank you.
You know, in this way, I don't have to be the listener yelling the titles of things or like, yes, and another thing, you know, by myself. I get to have an actual conversation with you. So.
Yes, I love it. Please tell everybody where they can find you and how they can support you.
Yeah. Well, I'm a life and leadership coach. I would say come subscribe for my newsletter. It's fun. I do talk about pop culture things, life tips, trying to get more women out here living audacious lives. So the link for that is bit.ly/Ivana subscribe. I'll make sure Julie has that.
Thank you.
Or you can just follow me on Instagram at Ivana Run the World.
And when you do follow her on Instagram, if something that she posts speaks to you, be sure to share it, because that is also a really good and easy way to support someone's work and spreading the word that is literally no cost to you. And that's how we uplift each other and support each other and pick apart the patriarchy one little snippet at a time.
I love that. Yes. Thank you. Do that.
After we recorded this episode, Ivana reached out to me with more thoughts, and I want to share them with you now. She said, I think Cheetah Girls' friendship is so much more mature because they're mostly Black / not white. Black female friendship tends to be one more based in community and care rather than superficiality. And she's absolutely right. Individualism is a concept that is really prominent in the major dominant culture. This idea that you must care for yourself and be independent. And within the Black and other historically marginalized cultures, community is undeniably important. Community is what keeps us going. Community is what supports us, not ourselves, the individual. Maybe we can do that. Maybe we're self-sufficient in some ways, but at the end of the day, it's the community that keeps us thriving and going. And while each Cheetah Girl has their own storyline, they are still connected and support each other. And that grief they feel when they realize things are changing, it's more than the prospect of the Cheetah Girls breaking up. It's the proposed prospect of their community changing. Also, I'd like to point out that Raven's Home, as far as I can tell, is still on the air. They had seasons 6 aired in 2023, and I did not look in to see if there's going to be a season 7, but IMDb hasn't clipped their wings yet. I also want to do a shout out to our Patreon pals, Carly, Kelly, Tracy, Sarah, Natalie. They are our OGs. Ooh, and Alicia. They have been riding this jealous wave since we launched our own community. We host a live book club, we host a member happy hour, and there's a bunch of perks. And honestly, I'd love to see you there if you'd like to join. You can learn more about our community on Patreon over at patreon.com/Julia Washington. We've revamped our Patreon recently, and if you don't know, we launched another podcast for our book club friends. Jelly Pop's Book Club was born from this show, and we cover book-to-screen adaptations as well. Our book club does meet once a month, which is a perk of our Patreon, but that doesn't mean you can't read along with us every month anyway. Pop Culture Makes Me Jealous is produced and edited by me, your host, Julia Washington. And if you are new around here, I'm a writer, artist, and podcast host based in California. And when I'm not hosting this show, I'm facilitating the Jelly Pops Book Club, pouring candles, or painting greeting cards. I'm also trying to convince my dog to snuggle 90% of the time. Sometimes she's down and she wants to snuggle, and sometimes she's like, girl, you left the house today. I can't hang. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Until next time, y'all.